make it a little bit more festive. Welcome and thank you for coming over your lunch hour to this webinar. I call it Utilizing Self-Reflection and Critical Analysis to Nurture Pre-Service Teachers' CRSE Competency Development. And I just want to say, first of all, shout out to Luca and to Juliet and Donna Marie and Karen and everybody who was behind the scenes kind of helping us go through this process. You're going to hear a little bit about my personal process coming up, but it was really quite a professionally and personally gratifying experience all across the board. So we're going to, let me see here, how many folks do we have? Oh, I know some friendly faces here. Thank you for coming. I appreciate you. So we're going to jump right in, and just what I'd like to do is, because I think we were asked to really focus on our personal experience with the whole process, and then whatever like deliverables we have to share with all of you. I'm happy to share anything. Of course, it's up on the website now and all of that, but if there are other questions that you have, certainly stop me and ask me at any time, or put it in the chat and Luca will help me out with that as well. But I really am just looking at, like my interest in the work, like why I wanted to actually become a part of PEDC, my process throughout the whole thing, the course adaptions that I made. I picked one particular undergrad foundational course to make these changes in, and then my revised assignments and syllabus. And then next steps, kind of what's happening at Millersville, kind of that has been inspired, I think, by this work and all the folks in this committee. So the first thing I want to know, though, is to make sure that I get this for your benefit, it's time well spent, is to see what do you hope to gain from attending this webinar. So if you could zap that QR code, go to the Padlet and just jot down some ideas, that would be great. And I'll have that as a reference. Okay, make sure I don't mess that up. I'm going to go to kind of working with two screens here so I can see what you do.
You can use that QR code, or you can click the Padlet link in the chat.
Okay. I love that. Someone wants to know about the areas that I've stretched the most in incorporating competencies. Perfect. Okay, get insights on the process. Excellent. And I know we have some higher ed folks and some K-12 folks here, so that's why I kind of wanted to get a sense of what you'd like me to focus on. Steps I took to revise my syllabus and partnering with colleagues in your department. Yeah, yeah. Okay, if anyone else is like, if you're traveling somewhere and you can't really use the Padlet, that's okay. If you just want to unmute yourself and share, it's a small enough group to do that too. I don't want to leave anybody out. Thank you. Luca put in the chat the course page and all of that. So, okay. So it looks like from what I have in the webinar anyway, the areas that I've stretched the most in incorporating the competencies, I got something to say about that. Steps I took to revise my syllabus and partnering with colleagues in my department, very important for the courses I teach particularly, and to get insights on the process someone else took when traveling on this revision journey. Okay, perfect. I will certainly, I think, get to that. If not, call me out at the very end and we will we'll be able to do that. I identify as a multiracial female and my pronouns are she, her. I realize that because I am white passing that I revel in a lot of the, privileges that I have with regard to that. But I think what really drew me to this work is that when I was in K-12, I was a high school English teacher for 16 years before coming to Millersville University. I was considered the only teacher of color in the entire school district. And that just needed to change, right? All the teachers of color were in urban districts. I was in a suburban district, but every district needs to have representation. So that was the impetus to my starting. And then I have been a DEI champion on our campus, doing trainings in the community, et cetera. And presently I'm serving in my third year of being chair of our President's Commission on Cultural Diversity and Inclusion, which really has opened my eyes up to a lot of what's happening across our whole campus and trying to focus on supporting students, faculty, and staff and administrators of color, particularly in that journey. So this was helpful. And of course, I'm a teacher educator. So I teach a foundations block class is one of them, and that's the one that I'm going to address today. I also teach an issues in secondary education class, which is really fascinating. I love it. It's for our seniors who are in the professional development school model. So the CRSE fit very, very well with both of those classes. And I've actually used them in both, but I'm just going to focus on foundations block. And then I teach a graduate version of the issues in secondary ed class as well. So kind of all of those experiences brought me to the work. And also because I run a program on campus called the Future Educator Pathway. And the goal is to try to recruit and retain students of color to consider careers in education. And I met Juliet a long time ago, it seems like now, at a conference. And we were like, we have to talk, because our talks were very similar as far as using a pipeline approach to diversifying the teacher workforce. So I've been doing that for a long time. And now we've developed that into the Future Educator Pathway, which includes a number of components. I won't go into all that today, but if you're interested in that pipeline program, just let me know and I'm happy to share that, that information with you as well. So that's kind of like why I was interested in this. And Juliet's a great person. So she's the first one I had contact with and kind of invited me to join this. And it just kind of has blossomed into now year 2 of this community of practice. So I'm happy that we're able to share our work to help other people along the process. And it is a process, right? So I spent a lot of my time working myself on competency number 1. And I'm a big advocate for that's really what everyone needs to do. All of our pre-service teachers, all of our in-service teachers, because that one's about, reflecting on your own lens, right? And understanding what has contributed to your decision-making as an educator or just as a person in general. And so I reviewed the 211. It's called, my course is a partner course with my colleague who teaches the educational psychology component. So we share virtually the same students, which is really nice. And it's a foundational course. So it's called the Social Foundations of Modern Education, what many of my colleagues in higher ed in this community of practice teach. And the focus on that course for me is really critical thinking, right? Having them make good decisions. And then a very big component is self-reflection. So I was able to integrate the CRSEs into the numerous self-reflection activities that I asked students to do. And I will say that I wasn't really pleased so much with how the result I was getting initially from the self-reflections prior to this, but then with sharing in the community of practice, sharing work with each other and kind of sharing strategies and activities and assignments with one another.
I think you'll be able to find something.
Structure that a little bit more. So I think I'm hopeful that this semester I'll get more of what I was looking for as far as the student self-reflection on that. And of course, you know, promoting DEI and belonging on our campus is really important, and in our schools is really important. So I guess I'm kind of known for the mentoring piece around campus, and then the DEI work because of being chair of the Commission on Cultural Diversity and Inclusion. And then this is round 2 of the community of practice. So happy to be here and to share our work with you. I've been really impressed with the quality of work of the folks in the community of practice, and really grateful for everyone being willing to share, because there is a vulnerability to this, right? We talk about that sometimes. We put out our stuff and we're very vulnerable, and people can come at it. And I've tried to learn in this whole process. So I guess one of my biggest growth, as someone asked about, is that I try to meet people where they are and kind of go from there. And I hope that people will extend me the same grace, because I'm still working on all of this. And I'm happy to do the work, but it's never done, as we know, right? So the course adaptations that I made along the way. Now, this course called The Social Foundations of Modern Education already had sort of an equity focus to it. And some of the readings were already in place since I assumed the course, right? I assumed these learning objectives when I took on the course. And because it's a block course that I teach in conjunction with someone else, it was pretty standardized. So the first thing I did was to kind of go through all the learning objectives and synthesize some things where they connected. So there were fewer of them, but also so that they were more aligned with the equity work that we're talking about. And then after working with the community of practice, I realized that I'll show you my syllabus then, but it's pretty, it's like a newsletter, right? So there's a lot going on. And I realized that that's not really appropriate for all of my students who might be on sensory overload. So I have created an accessible syllabus that I also, it is the same content, but it's just a little bit more readable for our students. And then I added some additional content to the syllabus. And then I correlated, as you'll see, I correlated the CRSE competencies with the learning objectives. And that was a really interesting process, right? And then when something didn't have a CRSE, I had to really think, like, is that something that belongs in this course or not, right? And then after talking with people about it, we realized that, oh, this particular objective that I initially thought maybe doesn't, it actually does fit with the CRSE. So they're pretty well aligned across the board. Some of the texts that I use in this class to teach by Bill Ayers, it's The Journey in Common. You know, sometimes it's hard to get college students to read. I mean, as some of you know. And so this one they love because it's a comic book format, right? So it's a little bit different. It kind of shakes it up a little bit, but he talks about some really pointed issues in education that we then unpack using a fishbowl strategy. And then I also offer We Want to Do More Than Survive by Dr. Bettina Love. I have been using that book. I use it particularly with my early childhood folks. And the Students Are Watching by Sizer and Sizer, I use mostly with my secondary folks. And then, of course, you have Ladson Billings, Banks, McIntosh, like a lot of those readings. But again, being in the community of practice, we have all those resources, and it was really helpful to see what other folks use, and I could steal, right? Highest form of flattery, steal somebody's idea. So, and then I mentioned how the importance of focusing on self-reflection, how important that is. And I needed to start with me first, right? So I actually go through the process with my students each time, kind of modeling for them. This is the kind of thinking that I had to do to figure out where my gaps of knowledge are and where my experiences have kind of led me down a certain belief path that maybe isn't really accurate, right? Because I'm older, right? So when I grew up, for example, when I grew up, it was very politically acceptable to say colorblind, right? That was like a nice thing to say to people about people. But as we know, that's not now. So a lot of that re-envisioning my thought process and my beliefs had to come into play. And so I did this self-reflection myself, like I said, and modeled it for the students. And then in the foundations course, I do a lot of in-class prompts. I'll show you an example in a little bit about what a prompt might look like. I use the Harvard implicit bias test. I know there's mixed feelings about all of that, but it offers up really good conversation, right? Where students who initially get very defensive about it, we can kind of unpack that defensive piece of it. And I think it helps them to grow. And then ultimately they do a self-reflection essay. So I've actually had, like in this foundations course, they only get a field placement for 8 days during the semester. So it's a limited one. And some of the CRSEs, my opinion is they're more suited to the in-classroom experience. So I really only had my students focus for their self-reflection, focus on competencies 1, 2, and 9 for their self-reflection essay. However, when we revise the field assignment that they do, and again, I had to do this in conjunction with my teaching partner who teaches Ed Psych, when we revised that and included the CRSEs, of course, we asked them to look for those in-school, in-classroom sort of examples of CRSEs that were happening. So that's how we kind of got the other ones addressed. You know, we instructed them on all of them, but that was important. So, so here, I'll show you an example of this, and then I'll kind of stop sharing and share my syllabus with you too. So this would be one particular prompt. I'm not going to say it's the best one because it's pretty open-ended, but it just gives you one example of, you know, select at least 2 of the competencies. Oh, so I should say, I have them, we did a whole lesson on the CRSEs, and then they do a self-reflection, right, where they are evaluating their level of competency within that, each of those 1, 2, and 9. And then I say select at least 2 of the competencies and think about questions related to the competencies and self-reflect on those. So it's kind of like developing a question, I hope gets them less defensive about things, but helps them to see that they can work through the process if they write a question and then answer the questions. And then we pose some of those questions to the entire class, right? And the SRJ is a self-reflection journal. It's just what we have on our learning platform that I like to use for them to submit everything. And then that was just one of the prompts as a precursor to their self-reflection journal. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for 1 minute and then show you some of these examples. All works well. So let's see, we'll start with this assessment rubric. Oh, that's not the right one. Why did it do that? Well, I can share this one with you too. Can you all see? Oh no, you can see. I got it. For some reason on my one screen, I could see what I was trying to make you see, but let's try it again. Okay, culturally relevant sustaining competencies pre-self-assessment. So as you can see, not showing me that one. Okay, there we go. I can move it now. So you're using some of the same language that we use with the rubric, entering, emerging, developing, and expanding. And we talk about those pieces. And then again, for this class, I only did competencies 1, 2, and 9. So they have the all the competency rubric over here, and then they can just submit this. So I've done this for a couple of semesters now, actually. And I'm collecting data on this, both pre and post, to see if their attitudes have changed, if they feel like they've grown in any way. And I'm in a really fortunate position because there are some students that I will have again as seniors. So these are mostly second years, but I'll have them as senior year. And I have my students do it in their senior year as well, and then try to compare those two and see any growth that they've had. That's just for my own information. And then the other example that I have for you of some of the work. Okay, so sorry. It's not showing the same things on each one, so I have to be able to move this. So the handout. Okay, there it is. So then the article report and handout. So I have them do, because they're out for 8 days, it really cuts down our instructional time a lot, but I do want them to do some research. And the research is on an article, right? They pick a hot topic. I have a lot of topics that align very nicely, I think, with the CRSEs, and then additional things like zero tolerance policies, et cetera. And then the students review one good peer-reviewed research article. They write a report on that, but then the authentic piece is that they do a handout that for their peers so that they can gather and share that information. And just as a matter of fact, today, my secondary students were back and they were sharing their, like in a roundtable fashion, they were sharing their articles. And it opened up some good conversation, right, about things like zero tolerance. And then someone else talks about Bettina Love's abolitionist teaching. And then they start synthesizing this information saying, oh, okay, so there is kind of a method to all of that. So that paper is up as well for you to look at in the website. And then again, we do a combined field experience. Oh, I'm sorry. And I don't know why it's doing that. It's showing me one screen on one computer and another on another. So that's making it hard. Okay, I'll show you the block synthesis. The one assignment that we do is, so you can see the block synthesis. I just can't roll it. I can't get to that screen. Oh, there it is. There, it's working. So for the 211 and the 241 course, we have always had them do this first part, which is after they have done all of the class, right? We have, instead of a final exam, we give one final project in both classes. And it centers around like everything that they've learned so far, right? So we have them, they can perform it in any way or present it in any way that they want. And we've gotten some really interesting, we've gotten quilts already made. We've gotten chairs that were built. We've gotten board games that students create that kind of just give them this authentic way to work. They can either work solo or with a group. We actually encourage group because we're social constructivists and we want them to talk about everything that they've learned. So we've done that for a number of years, this block synthesis project, and you can see kind of the question prompts that we want them to think about. And then they're supposed to provide specific references to course content in both courses that support their thinking about that. Right. But then we added, and we're going to see how this goes because this will be the first semester I'm doing it with this final project, but we've added the CRSE competencies to the list. And I will say that they just came back, our secondary folks just came back from the field, and they do a field report that is also aligned. That one's even more aligned with the CRSEs than this, right? I'll try to pull that up for you in a minute. But so they've had this talk, right? They've done self-assessment in the beginning. They've processed it in the classrooms when they're doing their field report. And then they're processing everything that we've done in both classes and kind of synthesizing that in to a final project at the end. And I'm really curious, as to how, we've even had talk shows, where they get on and they act out and they have little videos. And Students like it. I love to grade it because it's one of the most authentic assignments that we give. And so you can see that too. That's up there. I kind of put in red a lot of things that I've highlighted or that I've changed for those. So let me stop share there. And how am I doing for time? Okay. And then the field assignment is also up in D2L, and that's basically where they will they make observations of their classroom experience, and they align with the national board standards. And then they also are looking at CRSE competencies that are demonstrated there, or that they thought they should see in a specific spot, but didn't, right? So they're using their critical thinking to kind of apply what it is that they might do if they were in that situation. Okay, just checking the chat quickly. So those are just some of the examples of some of the assignments that we've done. Happy to talk to you more about them if any of those kind of strike your fancy. Then as part of their growth, right, in an understanding culture, most of the time when undergrads think of culture, they think of like black, white, and brown, right? They don't think about like the depths of culture. So Zaretta Hammond has this great, image that we use in class, and we kind of say these are the things that you mostly see, right? Hairstyle, dance, music, clothes, food, literature, language, etc. But then that's very surface stuff, and we talk about their surface level culture, right? What do people see, and what do they make assumptions about because of what they see? And then we have the shallow culture, the unspoken words that she talks about, some of the nonverbal communication styles, the nature of relationships. I give examples of me making mistakes when I was a high school teacher with regard to eye contact. Some cultures just really don't want to give you eye-to-eye contact. It's an act of disrespect. And so I had to learn that kind of the hard way, right? Concepts of time and ways of handling emotions, particularly when we talk about discipline, in the classroom situation, that tends to come up. But then I ask them to really look at themselves at that shallow level, but then also at that deep culture level. So, where do they get their worldview? And today, specifically because my students were talking about, zero tolerance policies and abolitionist teaching and things, that trying to get beneath all of that and figure out how are they going to be making decisions, on what basis, and what examples and experiences have they had that are going to contribute to that. And not to guilt them, and not to say your parents are bad or whatever, but just know your lens, right? And that's that competency number one. Know your lens, where you are and how you're making decisions. And then as an equitable teacher, you need to assess that, right? And make changes where necessary. So that, I love that graphic. And so these are the things that I talked about already: the article report and handout, the field report and reflection, and that block synthesis project. We've just kind of integrated. So I work with a whole team of people in Foundations Block. My partner, Dr. Deemer, and I work very closely together, and we have some of these same assignments, like I said, that we give credit for in both classes. So it's kind of coordinated in that way. But I have two other folks who teach the Monday, Wednesday class as well, right? So Dr. Deemer and I, my partner, we decided that we would give the field report a try this semester with the CRSEs and kind of see how it goes. And having conversations just now, the students are just back. This is the second day they're back. They're already using that language of CRSE. And I was like, oh, okay, that's probably better than I thought at this point, but we'll see how it unpacks when I grade their projects that are standing over here piled up. Yeah. So what are my next steps? So right now, this course is still in transition. I've actually integrated this into, like I said, my graduate course. What's interesting about my graduate course on Social Foundations of Modern Ed is that I have a couple of in-service teachers and a couple of teachers seeking pre-service teachers seeking certification. So it's nice to have that mix in that class, because the in-service teachers can talk about the realities of all of this, right? And we can have some honest conversation about that. But all the courses are still in transition. As a matter of fact, when we had our round 2 of the COP meeting, a lot of us in our breakout rooms were like, yeah, I'm still working on this, or this course has already changed from what I put in there, because we're constantly growing and evolving. So I see it as a very iterative process. The other thing that, of course, I'm sharing a lot with my colleagues, and I'm actually now in our College of Ed and Human Services, our dean, as those of you in higher ed know, we have all these chapter 49 revisions, right? The CRSE is one, the Model Code of Ethics is another, and then the structured literacy. So I'm actually leading the CRSE charge for evaluating our whole program, all of our programs with regard to CRSE, so that all of our teachers are prepared by the time they graduate with these competencies. So that's been a big undertaking, but the dean has been very supportive of all of this work and given us some curriculum time over the summer to think about this. And now we're actually revising. We're actually looking at revising our own. We have an in-house student teacher evaluation form, intern teacher evaluation form, that we are going to be revising, right? And not the 430, we can't do anything with the state form yet, but our own in-house form, we're doing that. And a lot of our other policies and things are really, we're really taking a look at all of that. And so I'm really excited about it, because it's not just me doing this in my class anymore, but it's spread like wildfire. And now everybody has to and is willing to, I wouldn't say everybody is willing to talk about it, but everybody's talking about it in terms of what it means, for us in developing quality and equitable teachers in the future. And of course, my ultimate goal would be, because I teach on a campus with a lot of other teachers, right? So my goal is to actually share this across campus. And we've invited people from across campus to our workshops. Donna Marie Cole-Malott has offered workshops for us and to help us get ready to make these transitions. And we've offered our colleagues across campus, like in our content areas, right, like biology and history and that, to come and join us. And a few have jumped on board because I think we're all teachers, like we all should be doing this too. And so that would be my ultimate goal, is to have all of our faculty really be aware of and do this, and I guess because I see some things, right, as chair of the President's Commission on Cultural Diversity and Inclusion, I see some microaggressions that I hear about them from students. And I think, oh, if people would just know about this and practice it, at least try to improve each day with it, then we would have fewer of these issues and our campus would be more welcoming to everybody. We are having right now, our CDIO is Mr. Carlos Wiley, and he's created this structure now for us to think about these things. We call them inclusive excellence teams on campus. So they're just getting revved up. And I keep pushing the CRSE sort of notion in that mix, right? That these are some things that we can be teaching. And as chair of the One Commission, I'll get to see all of these action plans that the different teams present and give feedback. So I feel good about being able to kind of make some suggestions with regard to that as well. So that's my spiel. And I don't know if it has met all of your goals, but if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself and asking questions, or let's see if there's anything in the, okay, love to see some of the student work. Yeah, okay. Okay, Ashley, let me write that down. Oh, will we save the chat then, Luca? Can you save the chat? Okay.
We'll save it all.
Then I can reach out to Ashley about the student. Yeah, if she's talking about the block synthesis projects, those are amazing. Like those are just, we've had full-blown like skits, that students do. And I've had poetry that I'm trying to get my one mentee to actually get published. She did a poem about her learning and her growth as a teacher and what she's uncovered. And it's amazing. So, oh, thank you, Juliet. So one question, the revised rubrics that align with PDS program framework. Oh, okay, that was your note. Okay. Oh yeah, Marguerita, I use that iceberg sometimes too. It's good to see your face.
Good to see you too.
We've emailed quite a bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, I use the iceberg thing as well with English language learners when we talk about that, right? So you have that basic language and then you have the academic language and some depth there. So
I meant that I actually use iceberg when we talk about culture,
yeah.
but I think your tree works better. More layers. I actually just answered this in the chat, but I had a question about like if you have received pushback from students or if they seem pretty open to learning.
Yeah. So, I always tell students, like, I feel like they're the great hope of the future. Like, I think they certainly get it more than my generation did. But I think that, they're starting to really understand the value of inclusion and belonging and diversity. So I will say, right, I mean, I can see the faces of probably 2 students right now that I think I have a longer road to toe with, just some things that we say and they go, or they roll their eyes or something. So no one's really come up to me and said anything like, really, this is stupid and I can't believe you're telling me to think this or whatever. But I always offer my class, the way I try to present to my class, because I want to meet everybody where they are, right? Saying that I'm not telling you how to think about something or what to think about something. I'm just asking that you think about these things, right? Because we've been programmed in many ways by the media and everything else to have certain beliefs about certain people. And so if we don't unpack that, we could do harm as teachers to students without even knowing that. And I try to make it as open as possible. Now I will have, I offer both sides. So sometimes I'll play the devil's advocate. So what do people say who go against this? What are they saying in the school board meetings that are so opposed to this? Why are they banning books? Like, try to get them to think about both sides of the issue, but then inevitably, most of the students come around to like, oh yeah, this is limiting. It's not expanding knowledge. And we're in the knowledge business and we want students to be able to make decisions for themselves and that sort of thing. So I wouldn't say to my face, probably there may have been not so much this year, I don't think, in last spring, but maybe in the fall of last year, I think some of my student evals reflected a little bit of people who didn't believe who weren't buying this. But a few, I could just tell by, kinds of things that they say. And I think it's sad because it's mostly politically charged. It's not about that people believe that all people shouldn't be respected. It's that they have these political stance that are getting in the way now, I think, of good decision-making,
Yeah, it's interesting. I find that our students also are receptive to growing. But I just always know that I only experience one group of students at one university. So I'm always interested to hear if that's the case elsewhere as well.
Yeah. And I think what's a beautiful thing is I have some students now in my classes who are willing to speak up on behalf of like LGBTQ or, people of color and kind of set the record straight a little bit. And I think that that's really helpful. I don't call on them to do that, obviously, but they feel comfortable and they want to do that. And I tell them that I appreciate that if they're willing to, because there's a vulnerability to that too, right? Like, so yeah. Juliet.
Thanks, Miriam. So to build off of that a little bit, how your course as a foundations course, I'm assuming, is positioned fairly early in the program for students. Mm-hmm. How did your mindfulness of the fact that you're in this other course that it's in block with might be kind of the early point of entry for students in the education pathway and the major to engage with some of this content? How is that different from perhaps courses that you teach later in the semester in terms of students' readiness? And how did you think about students' readiness for engaging in some of this in terms of their entry into the program?
Yeah, that's a great question because, based on my previous experience, right, when I would bring up some of these topics, even before I was in the community of practice, and I had to be very mindful of the fact that many of them in their foundations block often believe what their parents believe because that's their experience, right? So they come into it that way. And we honestly talk about that. Like, sure, that's what you know, so that's what you're going to go with. But look at these other philosophies out there, these other ideas out there. So I've had to walk pretty gingerly, I would say. Initially, I would not. I have another colleague in my department who's known for just calling them out like right away. And I'm like, okay, that's not my style, right? Because I believe that if I make you an enemy, then you're never going to like listen to what I have to say, right? But so I think that you have to be very careful. Now, when I have the same group, when I'm fortunate enough to have the same students their senior year, after they've had more significant classroom experience, there's where I see a lot of the growth, right? A lot of the like acceptance of the differences, and more aligned with the CRSE thinking when they didn't even maybe even have that language prior to us bringing it in, you know? So yeah, it's tricky.
So I would imagine that students have to develop a sense of trust with you in terms of your approach. And when I heard you sharing about how you model sort of your own vulnerability and thinking about and responding to the reflection prompts, to me that seems to demonstrate one way in which you sort of help to develop that trust with students. Could you identify other ways that sort of in your approach you can help develop that culture and community within the course such that students are willing to trust you and open up in that way and maybe be disarmed a little bit?
Yeah, thank you for that question, because I do spend a lot of time, and I unapologetically, I spend a lot of time in the beginning of the semester establishing a sense of community. So we talk about trust, honestly, we talk about this space. My students all nominate vision statements for how do we want to be as a group of people together. And our vision statement, of course, we have like our classroom agreement, you know, how do we want to respect everybody? And we talk about that. But then the vision statement is, how will we be different after this 15 weeks together? What do we aspire to be like at the end of this semester? And I always bring it up, like when we're having a hot topic, remember, this is our vision statement. How are you getting close to this, you know, before the end of the semester? I just brought it up today because we were talking about these hot topics from their articles. And I just want it to be a safe space for people to ask questions. And I do honestly now, I say I want to hear all perspectives from people, because if they're not willing to share their questions now, then and they go silent, they're not going to grow, and they're going to live under these certain premises that they've already had, right? So, and when people, and I try to say to folks, you know, there are certainly students who align with my way of thinking, and I have to be really careful that I appreciate that other people are willing to share their thinking, even if it's very different from mine. And then we can challenge all the thinking, right? We just challenge all of it. Like, why do people think that way? And where did you come up with that idea? And so, yeah, I do spend a lot of time creating that safe environment. And then another activity that I do, which is really vulnerable for me, is that I stand in front of the group when the first or second day, and I ask them to make assumptions about me. Right. So you just look at me and make assumptions about me. And so we write them all on the board, and then I check them, and I get to tell my story then a little bit with, you know, like they all think that I'm, well, Miriam Witmer, they think I'm Mennonite, you know, I mean, like that's a Mennonite name. And then I say, well, what image comes to your mind when I say Miriam Marguerita Gomez Witmer? And they're like, what? Oh, okay. Like and then we can unpack that. Why did you get a different reaction to that name versus the other name? You know, so that's a little vulnerable, but I enjoy doing it because I think it sets the stage for how they can be vulnerable in the class and really ask their questions. And many groups do. You know, right now I have a particularly good early childhood group that is willing to go there. Like they're willing to say, well, tell me about this, because I don't know, why do people say this is bad to say, you know, and we just can get real with it. So thank you for that question, because that's a big part of my class, and I didn't even mention it earlier, like community building. Good. What other questions do you have? conducive to growth and in-depth. I'm just looking at the, yeah, cohort model.
Miriam, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
So I was thinking about something that you said about your dean was supporting syllabi revision over the summer, and kind of from, you know, the CRSEs being across all educator prep programs. I know we're really focusing, but I'm kind of wondering more about your work in kind of pulling this all together for PDEs, assurances forms, right? Those very technical pieces.
Yeah. So our dean offered curriculum pay for folks who were interested over the summer to come and gather. So we did about 20 hours over the summer spread out, and we met via Zoom, and we kind of unpacked like our approach to this, like, right? So how do we even go about, because we have so many programs at Millersville, so many teacher prep programs. So we're like, oh, let's first just see, where does this fit? And so we did that. And then when we came back in the fall, the dean made a statement. She said, everybody in the College of Education and Human Services will be involved in this process. It's whether you want to do it over the summer or you want to do it in the fall, right? So everybody has to look at their courses. So then each department, for example, my Educational Foundations department, we met on a Friday and we did like a half-day retreat sort of thing where we put up all of the courses that we teach and where are we hitting CRSE, so we could see the gaps that we have in our programs. And then our leadership folks did that as well. So now we have this comprehensive look, like a crosswalk, a look at what it is that we are doing well and where there are gaps or where we could be doing better. Right. So first we just identified the spaces and the classes where we taught. And then we went back and we're looking at now kind of, is this an emerging thing? Or is this, we kind of rated it on a scale of 1, 2, or 3, you know, if it's a 3, it means like, yeah, we hit this really hard. If it's like in my foundations block, it's just a couple of 1s, right? Because I mention it, we do a little bit with it. So we did that. And then our next phase, the dean's buying us lunch and we're spending a whole day retreat next Friday for us to look at our policies, like our teacher prep, our evaluations, and our, you know, all kinds of policies that we have related to the teacher education program. And we're going to revise those. So, you know, and I'll be honest that what I don't want to be a part of is a checkbox, you know, like I don't want to be a part of that. If I'm going to put my energy into something, I want it to be really meaningful and make change where we're needed. And, you know, one of the other impetus for me was I had a group of students that I worked with in Color of Teaching mentoring program many years ago who reached out to me and they said, hey, you know, they're teaching like in Philadelphia and in Washington, D.C. and all these places. And they're like, we feel like we could be doing better with cultural education, like at Millersville at the program. So I got together with them a couple times and they gave me their plan and what they would like to see. And then the CRSE, this whole, you know, PEDC came about and I said, yeah, this is exactly what they're talking about. So, so I think that we're trying to, you know, I think maintain our good reputation at Millersville of being a quality teacher prep program. And this is one way that we have to address that, you know, and to do that. So it's become our whole college. And now the dean is like siding with me a little bit saying, yeah, people across the whole campus should be exposed to these at least, and, you know, be able to check themselves, you know, do a little self-reflection on these CRSEs. So we have like a Center for Academic Excellence that does little seminars and web, you know, things like that for our local folks, our campus folks. So that may be, she's encouraging me to do a session like that to get it across campus too for other folks. So yeah. But I would say that for me personally, although I've done a lot of work in this area over the years, I am still uncovering more and more that I need to really address, you know, for myself and really get more knowledge about certain things. And that's a good thing, you know, it's all right. And I think when you tell people that, even my colleagues, that they feel less intimidated, you know, by doing the work. So that would be a little tip I would give as well. But thanks for the question, Ashley. What other questions are there, or anything else you want me to clarify before we go? Oh, okay. So do you put a link in, Luca, for the feedback form? Okay.
Yeah, I'll put that now just in case folks want to take a look. All the questions are optional, but we appreciate whatever feedback you are able or willing to share. We'll also send that in a link to everyone who registered for this. But this is in addition to kind of providing us with information about what resonates or what you're still curious about. This is also an opportunity on this feedback form to connect with Miriam if you're interested in having her as a coach or thought partner in your CRSE work. And that could be whether you are in K-12 or higher ed. Miriam will be available as part of her commitment to the community of practice for some thought partnership and coaching support. So if you're interested in that or interested in connecting with someone else who's in our community of practice, you can note that on that form, or you can send me an email directly so that we can get you connected. And we're really excited about that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Ashley, where are you?
I'm at Westchester University, so I'm not far from you. So
I'm sorry, you said
Westchester.
Westchester. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I know you, I've seen you present at PACD before, and I know you know my colleague Beatrice pretty well. So
yeah. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yep. Anyway, I can be a help. I'd be happy to do that. I'm going to be busy on my campus with this work, but that's good. I'm happy to help out spread the love, right? That's why I say share the love. Okay. If there's nothing else, you got 6 minutes of your life back.
Thank you so much, Miriam.
Thank you so much.
Really
This has
appreciate
been really wonderful.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody. Happy Halloween.